Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. This episode dives deep into the legacy and future of D'Addario & Company with James D'Addario, the chairman and director of innovation. With roots in string making that stretch back to the 17th century, Jim shares how his family craft evolved into a global leader through innovation, automation, and a relentless focus on quality. Jim and I explore how string design affects musicianship, why clear communication is critical in marketing technical products, and the vital role of customer feedback in driving innovation. From navigating the challenges of American manufacturing to preparing the next generation to lead, Jim's story blends tradition with forward-thinking vision. It's a masterclass in entrepreneurship, music technology, and what it means to lead with both precision and heart. From custom strings to community values, this conversation is packed with insights from makers, musicians, and entrepreneurs alike. It was a real pleasure to have Jim D'Addario on the show, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Hi, Jim. Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah, it's great. How are things there in Long Island?
Very, very hot right now. We're in the middle of a heat wave. Where are you located?
I'm in Tuscany right now, and it is definitely a heat wave as well.
Yeah, the entire east, northeast, and southeast is going to be really hot for the next 2-3 days in the high 90s Fahrenheit.
Yes. Yeah. The difference is, as a Canadian, I'm here trying to find cool, and the Tuscans are going, finally, spring is here.
So you live in Tuscany. That's cool.
Yeah, I split my time between Tuscany and northern Canada. So it's much of my early career was helping Europeans do business in North America, and so I find myself split between these places. I have one child who lives in Europe and one child who lives in Canada also, so life just led this way.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, D'Addario is an Italian name. Where is D'Addario from in Italy? Do you know the history?
Sure, absolutely. It's kind of unique, actually, because my dad's family came from a little town called Sale, Sale, in the Abruzzi Mountains. It's near L'Aquila. Very earthquake-prone area. So, lots of things have happened to the town there over the years. Not very good sometimes. And it was known as a string-making town. So to this day, there's still 4 families from Sale making strings at some level. So the Inomari family, Labella, they're in Newburgh, New York. They're still going pretty strong as a string manufacturer. So D'Addario and Inomari would be the biggest, and then there's the Gale family, which is a pretty good size operation in Naples. Now they originated from there, as did the D'Orazio family, which is a very tiny business still going on in that area. I think they're in L'Aquila now. But my grandfather came here in 1905 after one of a series of earthquakes. The town was very prone to earthquakes and very, very poor. But they were shepherds, so the way they got into strings was in the winter months when they would slaughter the sheep or just groom them and take the wool and so on. They also learned how to make strings from the intestines, because most of the violin and viola strings utilize sheep gut, not cat gut. People think it's cat gut, but that's never the case. It wouldn't be big enough or long enough or strong enough. But over the years, the intestines from various animals have been used for different voices of string requirements in the orchestra. Obviously, for lower strings like an upright bass, they might use actually beef or calf or intestines because of the larger sizes. But the whatever was in the grass and the soil in that area made for very strong and good performing strings. So a lot of the strings that were provided for the fine violin makers in that whole region of Italy came from that area, because they were very reliable and of pretty high quality. So they would make strings in the wintertime, and they'd herd the sheep in the summer, and made a lot of good pecorino cheese in that town. So my grandfather came here in 1905. He was 14. He came with his dad. He didn't really like America. I mean, he loved America, but his dad didn't, and his dad went back and left him with an uncle who knew the
Mhm.
trade of string making and taught him how to make strings here in America. Originally, he was starting to import them, so there was a shortage of really good violin strings at the time in
Mhm.
America, and music, the record business and pop music was starting to become very popular. And there was a surge in interest in playing instruments, so there was a shortage of strings, and he tried to fill that void and did some importing. Except that during World War I, then there were embargoes and so on, and he had to learn how to make them himself here, which he did.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
later on, I went and traced our genealogy back all the way to 1680, contiguously. Uh, the 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 Dario family was making music strings, so it
Mhm.
goes back centuries. But it
Okay.
was always a very tiny thing when we came here in America. My grandfather had a shop in the basement of his home in Jackson Heights, right near where LaGuardia Airport would eventually be built.
Mhm.
And In 1959, when he retired, my dad made a partnership with some other gentlemen from that area and created Darko Music Strings, which was in business on its own from 59 to 69. And
Mhm.
then in '69, he merged with CF Martin Guitars in a stock transaction, a stock swap, and um, they we worked there for 5 years under contract, and didn't really enjoy, not running our own business, and ended up
Mhm.
deciding to split off and start over again. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, the Martin family's been very fair to us, and we have a good relationship, and but you know, we, my father in particular, was used to being his own boss. So,
Yep.
it was, and having a smaller business that was more entrepreneurial.
Yeah. 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 I understand. I get offers all the time, and although there's some good job offers out there, I
Mm.
just can't imagine having to work for someone else. I like calling my own shots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's nice when you come up with something that can yield you a good living in an area that you're passionate about. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Sure.
feel very lucky because I never really felt like I worked a day in my life. I fell in love with the family business when I was like 12, 13 years old and saw the Beatles on TV, and instantly became my father's string tester and product development guy. So I've been doing this for 60 plus years. I'm
Mhm.
75 now, but I've been going to the NAMM show since I was 13. So,
Mhm.
it's in my blood, and I kind of got very passionate about it while I was still in school. I almost didn't finish college because I was working full time already and got married, but I stuck it out and did get my degree from Hofstra University. And,
Mhm. Mhm.
it was an accomplishment I felt was necessary. That,
Mhm. Mhm.
quitting would have been kind of bugged me for my whole life, probably.
Sure. What was that degree in?
Music. Um, you know,
In
yeah, that's a Bachelor of Arts in Music. I was actually taking music education because I used to teach in a studio, and I had as much as 25 guitar students a week at one time. But I liked it, but it didn't offer me the same kind of excitement of
Mhm.
owning your own business and building your own products, and maybe, raising the state of the art in terms of the way uh, guitarists get to play and sound.
Mhm.
There
Mhm.
was, when I first started working, guitar strings were still pretty much an art, not a science, and they were
Mhm.
also just kind of discovered, things. The research was all seat of the pants, trial and error type research. There was no sophisticated laboratory work or CAD design for machines or anything like that yet. So I got to enjoy implementing all these wonderful technologies that came along during my career, from fax machines through email through AutoCAD, and then, SolidWorks and all kinds of other tools that I learned to use to design machinery at first and then products later on. And now I have a
Mhm.
huge team of engineers designing machinery for every one of our divisions, whether it's drumsticks or woodwind reeds or whatever. We build all that. We have a separate factory where we just build machinery. And,
Yeah.
we've seen all of that kind of technology evolve, which was kind of fun and exciting to implement. And, now we're on the horizon of figuring out how to implement, I think, the most complicated thing, AI. Because, I
Mhm.
think AI can make a tremendous difference to anyone's business, but it's also dangerous. And you know, it could really screw you up or screw up the world actually if we don't regulate it to a certain extent without stifling it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I mean, that's always the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is, what can we do without screwing things up?
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, that's what you're constantly doing in business, right? If
Yeah.
you're the innovation guy, if you're the one who's trying new things and always trying to take the business to the next level, that's always the balance, finding the
Yeah.
equilibrium between how far one can go without
Yeah.
falling off the edge.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always this mystique about things things being crafted and handmade, which is lovely. And if you get
Hmm.
a piece of furniture and it's a one-off, but there's lots of things on a guitar or any instrument that if they're not made with precision,
Hmm.
there's a real good chance the performance will not be what you want it to be at some level. And so I've always been an advocate of integrating whatever technologies became available to us into our string winding and ball ending machines, whatever machines we were building, so
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
I would eliminate the variables that my
Hmm.
competitors were kind of just dealing with, you know. And eliminating variables in any kind of process is really the key to success. If you can eliminate variables and have a first pass yield that's in the high 99s percent, you're going to make a product that's going to be so consistent that people are going to recognize that. And I think that that's been my philosophy for 60 years, and it's paid off. You know?
You know, it's spot on, and it's the reputation you have. I can confirm this because recently I've been running a little experiment. I always have a certain set of questions I'm trying to deal with, and one of the things is that I think that and this is gonna, I don't want this to sound like an advertisement here because this really is not supposed to be an advertisement. It's supposed to be a conversation, but I think the string is really misunderstood, and frankly, I think the drumstick is also. I'm a multi instrumentalist. I spent just as
Yeah.
much time playing drums. I'm actually
Hmm.
started on drums before I went to bass and guitar, and switching a drumstick makes a huge difference, especially on your cymbals,
Yeah.
and then on your drums also. I mean, you
Yeah.
can sound like you have a completely new cymbal by
Yeah.
switching your $10, $20 drumstick.
And same thing
You
with a
know,
head, drum head.
you
You switch
yeah,
the drum head
exactly.
and you got a new drum.
Yeah, but the drum head's more complicated. You can reach
Yes.
over and grab another stick,
Yeah. No.
right?
But
And of
there's so
course,
many different shapes and weights and stuff, though. And
yes,
it does come into play.
yeah, and strings are the other thing. And I'm someone who's stimulated by novelty, by new and interesting things that make me approach something, make me reconsider something. I really live for this kind of exploration and
Yeah, me too.
curiosity. Yeah, that's why I was excited to talk to you today, so we could get into that. But when I talk with guitar makers, of which I speak with many hundreds of guitar makers around the world every year, I've been asking this question about what they do with their strings and how important they think the string is. And they all say more or less the same thing. Oh, it all starts with the string. I mean, it's all about the string. And then when I say, do you ever alter the string, change the string to a different, or do you use the same string for everything you're doing? The answer almost 100% comes back. I use the same string because they're looking for that bit of consistency that if there's something that is off, it's not the string. And over again, they tell me that they're using actually the Dario strings, not supposed to be a plug for you. But the reason is that it's your consistency. So what you just said about your first pass 99 point whatever percent and that you eliminate variables, it's exactly why almost everybody who I've asked the string question has told me, and not everybody uses D'Addario strings, but
Of course not.
almost everyone, when they said D'Addario, they said they use them because they can count on them and they're not a variable. It's the consistency.
Yeah, a lot of our luthiers that we've done videos with have given us some wonderful quotes like that as well. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, that we've had really reputable people, and I don't want to like just start be quoting people because if I get it wrong, I'll get in trouble. But you know, they'll say, I mean, I go for a set of EJ16 uncoated because I know if I put them on a guitar I just finished, that if something's not right, it's not the string. That
Mm-hmm.
the string tells me whether my guitar is set up right and whether it's intonated properly and all that stuff. So they want to eliminate those variables. in the
Mhm.
string completely, right? And
Mhm.
there are companies that make all different alloys or different makeups or core and wrap combinations, and they all lots of them have merit, and people might use those as their regular thing. But when you're setting a guitar up, off the line, whether it's a factory making 500 guitars a day or it's somebody making one a month, um, it's the same process. The string is going to be critical to making sure that you're setting the guitar up right. And
Mhm.
so I've always, like I don't sleep at night when I think we could do better. And,
Mhm.
I've spent my whole life going to bed at night thinking about how we could make it better the next day, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then we over the years, we did so much work with our machinery. And I love when people talk about, well, hand winding is better than, machine winding. Well, they don't know the difference. I mean, all
Mhm. Mhm.
winding is on a machine. It's just that, where do
Right.
you draw the line on what you're doing with your hands and not?
Mhm.
I watched my grandfather, my brother, and my father wind strings by hand for 10 years, and I always felt, even as a little kid, that someday I'm going to automate that because that's not making sense to me. Grandpa's
Mhm.
making a really good string in the morning when he isn't tired, and then at the end of the day, he's not making the same string he made in the morning. That's why when I used to gauge every string for him and package him, I would see
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
differences, right? Because
Mhm. Mhm.
wire stretches while you're winding a string, so we call that
Mhm.
pull down. So I
Mhm.
could, if I've got the temper of a wrap wire, kind of semi-soft, where we want it for a particular alloy, while I'm winding, if I pull more, I could stretch it down almost, a thousandth or more in diameter,
Yep.
especially a six
Yep.
string. And if you're doing that inconsistently along the string, now you've got a string that isn't going to intonate. Your harmonics are going to be
Mhm.
bad. So the myth about hand winding, it's like, yeah, there
Mhm.
might be a few genius guys out there that make a great string occasionally, but there's absolutely no scientific method reasoning behind saying
Mhm.
that that's better than a CNC controlled machine that's controlling the tension you're putting on the wrap wire perfectly, like
Yeah.
in synchronous, like it's like what it all our machines measure that tension and constantly adjust themselves, right? It's
Mhm.
so precise. And then the angle of the winding is all done with computer sensors and servo motors. So all of those things that a perfect hand winder has to do and
Mhm.
be trained to do perfectly all day long, which is impossible to do for 8 hours a day, they're
Mhm.
built into
Mhm.
every single machine. And
Yeah.
I went through such lengths that in the beginning of our building our brand, that I would spend so much money on this stuff that my dad and my brother would sometimes scratch their head and they'd question whether I was doing the right thing.
Mhm.
And I'll give you one example was, you know, I had to I had the amazing good fortune to have some incredible mentors in my life. Mario McAferry for one, but also Norman Pickering. And Norman was responsible for the stereo moving coil magnetic cartridge Pickering phono cartridges. He was
Mhm.
also a Juilliard graduate on the organ and the viola. He was an acoustical engine doctor of engineering from New Jersey Institute and a mechanical engineer. This guy was the epitome of a genius, and he
Mhm.
worked for us for about 30 years as a consultant after he lost his phono cartridge business. And he developed with me a closed loop tension monitoring system for when a string is being wound and
Mhm.
the applying the tension. And they were about $500 a piece or $750 a piece to build. We built them ourselves. He made the circuit and everything,
Mhm.
and it was before you could just buy some of the stuff off the shelf. And when
Mhm.
I put it on the first 3 or 4 machines, and I used to do all this work myself. In fact, in the beginning, I was assembling all the machines and designing them myself. When I put this into works on 3, 4, 5 machines, the consistency was so much better that we had like 100 machines to do. It
Mhm.
was a huge investment for this tiny company.
Yep.
But I said, we have to do this because this will make us so much better than our competitors. But
Mhm.
that meant you don't take money home for a long
Mhm.
time, right? When
Mhm.
you do
Mhm.
those kind of investments. And that's been our
Yep.
philosophy from day one. And it's why we could still manufacture these strings here in America and compete with anyone around the world. because we've
Mhm.
automated it, we've eliminated variables, we don't have a reject rate that's hurting that bottom line, and
Mhm.
those kind of things were very from the gut progressive. It's like, no, we must do this. This
Mhm.
makes the perfect string. There's no
Mhm. Mhm.
reason not to do it. Just borrow the
Yep.
money and pay for it over time if you have to. But you have to do this. It's too good. As a
Mhm.
musician,
Mhm.
I knew it was too good. So there's countless examples like that over the course of my career here, and they they s- they all made us different than our competitors, and so much to the point where after we've pretty much taken all the mystery out of making a steel core string, from acoustic or electric, then we started to dive into making the wire. And we got a whole
Mhm.
wire mill two doors down where we
Yep.
make high carbon steel, and we make phosphor bronze and 80/20 and nickel plated steel wrap wires, and we coat wires, and um, our wire making is so good that of more than half of my competitors buy wire from us now. Now,
Mhm.
what does that tell you? They telling you that our raw material is something they covet because
Yeah.
it's really of high quality, and we're proud
Right.
of that. And we really need them to buy the wire so that we can afford to have this wire mill and cover the overhead. So we're
Mhm.
fair with our pricing, and we were very strict about customer service, that we would never screw somebody if there was a shortage. We would always honor the agreements we make. And
Mhm. Mhm.
it's a separate little business and not a huge money maker as a separate business, but it enables us to make a better string, right?
Yeah.
And that's the
Yes.
key thing. Every day is, how do I make a better string?
Yeah.
How do I make a better capo? How do I make a better cable? How do I make a better reed? And that's what all of these guys that work for me have. That's what's been ingrained in their training and
Yeah.
philosophy.
It's what drives the best of anybody in any industry.
Yeah, sure.
I just spent some Ola Strandberg just came and visited me here for a week here in our home in Tuscany, and he was just obsessive about shaving off any ounce of weight he could on his guitar, like anything,
Mm.
the hardware, the pickups, the
Yeah.
specific choice of wood. Do I have a little bit too much at the top of where the headstock would have been if he didn't make headless guitars? Like every, every bit. And if he
Yeah.
hears of something new that's a new technology that does as good of a job or better, that is a little bit lighter, he's very interested because he's chasing this particular vision all the time.
Yeah.
I have a guitar maker in Germany, Uli Teufel, who makes his own stainless steel screws because he just can't find them of the high enough quality, that he makes those just for the string retainer, because this is also a headless guitar in that one little part,
Sure.
and that's
And those could be
completely,
critical. Yeah.
yeah. But most people would say that's nuts. Like, do you really need to do that? Well, no, I guess it'd probably
We
be
do
cheaper
things
to
like that
buy
here.
the lesser quality one and
Yeah.
send out new screws when someone had a problem, I guess. But that's not, with somebody who has a vision, that's not what you do.
No.
You chase the vision, you
Yeah,
know?
like I work closely with Ned Steinberg. He's a good friend, and Ned's designed our
Yeah.
capo line pretty much, and tuners, and uh,
Hmm.
you know we unfortunately we make almost all our capos in Taiwan, and I'm trying to make them here, and we
Hmm.
chose to die cast them out of aluminum initially, and we've got beautiful capos, and there is technology in our capos that we have yet to be able to successfully communicate to the marketplace through marketing and
Hmm.
sales, that really do make them superior. And I don't want this to be an ad, so I'm not going to go into why.
No,
But
I want to know.
well, I'll share some of it. But the point is, we also wanted to reshore those to America. We've been on a heavy duty reshoring
Hmm.
program,
Hmm.
and we've been constantly bringing things back in. We vertically integrate heavily here. So we have
Hmm.
our own injection molding equipment now, and we're making our pro winders and our reed cases and peg winders and all kinds of accessories that we used to make in Asia and
Hmm.
China. But over since 2008 market crash, we've been on a steady incline of bringing those things back to America. And the
Hmm.
only areas where we're stuck is where it's particularly impossible to get the labor out of a product because the quantities you're making aren't big enough to automate at the level you need to. So
Yep.
there's three main product areas that we still buy from Asia.
Hmm.
Is a mid and low price cables,
Hmm.
tuners, you know,
Hmm.
electronic tuners, and capos, and we were working on the capos. We could not find a company in America to die cast small aluminum parts at even
Mm-hmm.
anywhere near the cost that they
Mm-hmm.
do it in Asia. In fact, we
Yep.
couldn't even get the material for the cost of the
Mm-hmm.
finished product that we were getting. So we started to say, well, what else could we do? And we got obsessed with the weight. And
Mm-hmm.
what we did
Mm-hmm.
was we found 15 super high performance polymers that
Mm-hmm.
have all kinds of additives, and we hit on one that's got graphite fibers in it. And we were able to take one of our cables, which is in beta now, and I could send you one for testing, and injection mold that with a carbon fiber composite, and it's as light as a feather and it's stiffer than steel. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I don't like a heavy capo when I
Yep.
play
Yep.
with a capo. I don't
Yeah.
want,
Sure.
number one, I don't want to feel the weight, but I also just psychologically think it's changing my tone, you know, and I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people do. And, so your friend that was obsessed with lowering the weight of his instrument, he's
Mm-hmm.
correct in a lot of ways that there are advantages to that. And we took that same approach with these capos. And, because necessity is the mother of invention. So we're trying to find, how can I make these in America?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got to make them in America, but at the same time, let's make them better, right? And I
Yep.
think that the carbon fiber solution will be the better capo of the future, and we're just getting ready to do a large beta test of them and then launch one model. And but those are the kind of things that I spend my life on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Diving into
Mm-hmm.
that and using a good genius like Ned to help is always
Yep.
an advantage. And we get along great, and he works wonderful with our team, and so we've designed a lot of cool stuff together.
Yep.
Um, and we probably will keep doing that as long as our brains are working. Even
Yes.
if I slow down and pretty much retire from the day-to-day stuff, I still wanted to work on some product development or take on some special challenge projects where they might be stuck on something or whatever, where I could just go to work on it at home myself and come in for a couple of update meetings, that kind of thing.
Yeah. That's the dream.
Yeah,
I've been having a lot of conversations and work around legacy and succession because we're at this point in our industry where that sort of explosion that happened with seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show and all the people who ran out and bought guitars and drums
yeah,
and all the pop musical instruments. Everyone of that age is, they're retiring or their
yeah.
companies are being sold or they're dying, frankly, also, and so there's this conversation about, well, I've been passionate about what I've been doing for the last 40, 50 years. How do I move that forward? How do the people who work for the company continue to have a good job and all of our friends that we've made around the world and you want to see your life's work continue. Um, well, you're part of a legacy company that's already gone through some generations,
Yeah.
and there's a few of them that exist. The Martin Company, also exists in that same way here in America, but most have been sold in some way.
Yeah.
But you talk about, how to carry that on and how to keep that sort of excitement and spirit going. Because, the founders of the companies are usually the visionaries, usually the entrepreneurs of some sort. And you can find people that will run a good business. You can find people that will balance the books and manage your supply chain and all of this. But
And
it's
you need
that,
them. You definitely
and
need
you
them.
absolutely, as a matter of fact, they always come in because
They're the
there's no
core.
such thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no such thing as the entrepreneur sort of founder that just does everything well.
Mm.
So they always need this. The ones who do great find a great team of people who are very consistent at managing logistics and having it all happen so that they can obsess about a particular idea and take that next one
Yeah.
there, and someone else is paying attention to whether or not they ordered a particular material or paid a particular bill and all of that, right? You know that.
Yeah.
But here you are now, and one of the things that really I wanted to dive into is the fact that your official title is Chief Innovation Officer. And I'm sure there are other companies who have Chief Innovation Officers, but I don't know any Chief Innovation Officers in our industry. And that says something. And D'Addario has
Well,
always
Bob
been an
Taylor is. He
innovative
just
company.
doesn't call himself that, right? There are many
Well,
that
people who act
that
it, but
play that role.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's on your website and maybe your business card. I've never seen your business card. I don't know,
Well,
and so
in 2020, I was the CEO, and I had been the
yeah.
CEO since my brother John retired at an early age.
Hmm.
Um, in the late 90s, and
Hmm.
he was a 50% partner. So his family and my family are the ones that owned the family business. We
Hmm.
have another brother and sister, but my brother's a lawyer, and my sister was not involved in the business,
Hmm.
or her husband wasn't either. But so it was always my brother John and I's family, and then he has 4 kids. I have three, and
Hmm.
he's
Hmm.
got 11 grandkids, and I have eight. So
Hmm.
there's a big farm system out there, but you can't just say, you must work in the family business. I hope you not, or I hope you work in the family business. You got to let them discover it themselves.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it won't be a true decision, you know? So you kind of, what we've been trying to do is set the stage in a way to assimilate what I went through and my brother John went through to be attracted
Hmm.
to the family business. I mean,
Hmm.
there's obviously tremendous advantage if you have a family business that's number one, successful and profitable, that you could take to another level and enjoy the work and be passionate about it. But if it's not in your blood and you don't love it, then you're
Hmm.
going to take on something that's not going to drive you to excellence or innovation or to be a leader in the field. So we really don't want family members to just say, oh, I'll go work for the family business or whatever and not be excited about it, right? So we've
Hmm.
tried to kind of recreate the way of how do we get these guys excited. And in generation five is what we call it, because John and I are generation three. We have my grandfather, my dad, and then my brother John and I, and then our children are generation four, and the grandchildren
Hmm.
generation five. So a lot of the generation four is involved in the business. My nephew, John's son, is the CEO now. So in
Hmm.
2020, I stepped down as CEO and started to work on succession with John the third, to
Hmm.
teach him the job of being the CEO, and he's doing very well.
Hmm.
Um, he's going to need help, just like his dad would have needed help or needed help from someone like me. Uh,
Hmm.
my brother John and I had a perfect partnership. He was really good at the nuts and bolts business stuff, and
Hmm.
that's what he loved to do, and that was what he was passionate about. And I was really interested in designing better machines, designing better strings, designing better, anything we were using, or buying.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so when people used to ask us, well, how do you separate your responsibilities? I used to say, well, John works on today and I work on tomorrow. And that was a very simple way of saying, I'm just focused on some new stuff here, and
Yeah.
John's keeping me going, and I didn't have to look at it. But then when he retired, obviously, I had to dive in and learn that as well, and I had to hire people from outside the family because the kids weren't old enough to be involved yet, and we didn't know who all would be involved, right? So
Hmm.
there was
Hmm.
only a couple involved at the time. So it was, these are all delicate transitions, and you try to do them, fairly and motivate everybody to stay focused on the goal of succeeding, so, making a good succession plan that works. So now
Hmm.
we're in a phase where John the third is the CEO, and I stepped back and said, okay, I'm going to still do your innovation for you. So I'm going to be your innovation partner as director of
Hmm.
innovation and chairman of the board. I'll still run the board. We have a great board with outside directors that we meet quarterly, which has been a really like an MBA for me because I didn't study business. So
Hmm.
I learned a lot from that, and we want to keep that process going as well. So, but I'll keep the chairman's title for a few years, for as long as my brain's still working right, and and then we'll see who takes that role later. So
Hmm.
I created this director of innovation function, and I managed the product development teams and the engineering teams, and also a bit of the marketing, the bit of the product management, because a good
Hmm.
part of being an entrepreneur and designing products is knowing which ones to design and how to
Hmm.
define them and how to do the research to identify what the marketplace needs. You don't just make something because you think it's a good idea, or sometimes I did, but most of the time you want to actually have a reason.
Hmm.
What problem are we solving for the musician that our competitors haven't really solved well enough, right? Or
So
maybe
how do
even
you
thought
stay
of selling.
informed there? How do you be aware of that? How do you remain aware of that?
Well, the business, our company is broken up into three business units: percussion, band and orchestra, and guitar plus, which is guitar accessories and strings.
Hmm.
And in the band and orchestra side, the orchestral strings are in there. And each one of those business unit managers creates a really good report each month. I look at we've got great business intelligence software that we use that, you could click on a dashboard in the morning and see all the key metrics. You could see, like every Monday morning, I could click on and see what our biggest customers that order on Monday morning, what orders came in, and
Hmm.
you could see every detail of the business very quick. We just click around, so it's not hard to stay in tune with what's going on with the business. And the unit managers put together a nice two-page monthly report that I review for each one. So it give me a real good idea of what's going on, what challenges might be there. And then when I see a challenge, I might, you know, give some advice on the management level, or sometimes, roll up my sleeves and get involved a little bit. I don't do as much of that as I used to, unless it's a product. If it's a product design, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can't predict future needs based on historical records. So
No.
when, and so when you're doing something that maybe doesn't yet exist yet, you're if you're responding to a need, or in that scenario, is it intuition? Is it a hunch? Is
Well,
it
we
an
do this
artist or guitar maker
ideation.
coming to you
Yeah.
saying, "Hey,
Each each brand will have an ideation meetings either quarterly or biannually. It depends on how many
mm-hmm,
accessories and things we're making for that particular brand. But let's just take guitar, which is obviously our biggest accessory group.
mm-hmm,
We will have a quarterly meeting, and we have project management software that we use where every active project that we're actually designing and trying to build and get to market is
mm-hmm,
being tracked with tasks, assignments, and everything. And it's very buttoned up so that we know when
mm-hmm,
somebody's late on a task. And we meet weekly and have a sprint meeting on Monday for each
mm-hmm,
brand.
mm-hmm,
And that's usually a half an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the brand. I mean,
mm-hmm,
and an hour. And there we identify any issues we may have with samples or things that are being done, that prototypes that didn't work or whatever. And then we identify what needs to be done. And the next day, we have brainstorming meetings with the engineering department and the business unit where we go over all of those things that came up during sprint, or that we
mm-hmm,
might know have milestones coming up that we need to work on. So that's our active stuff. But then there's the
mm-hmm,
ideas, the
mm-hmm,
ideation that's sitting on a very long list, and some of them are horrible
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
ideas, right?
Okay, yeah,
And no
yeah, yeah,
idea is a bad idea. It goes on a
yeah,
list. And then we have those meetings where we kind of brainstorm. So a perfect example is our expand pedal board. Well,
yeah,
nobody's really marketed a pedal board that could grow with you or shrink with you if you want to. I'm doing a wedding and I want only three pedals and I can't fit on the stage or whatever. I could
yeah,
shrink my board very easily and make a good wiring system so that's easy to do. Um, that was all intuition on the part of our team, to
mm-hmm,
sit
mm-hmm,
there and say, hey, that would be a really great idea. And then, we
mm-hmm,
figured out how to do it. And um, we discovered that somebody had a patent out there
mm-hmm,
that we would infringe on if we did it. So we went and we bought the patent so that
mm-hmm,
we could control it and that we would have a patent. So those are but those things, there is a lot of intuition involved, clearly, and that's what really great entrepreneurs do, is they have good intuition, and get a gut feeling for something. You feel good about it. I mean,
mm-hmm,
I think
mm-hmm,
Steve Jobs took that to the level. He hardly ever did market research, but now we
mm-hmm,
tie it to market research, and we're fortunate to have a very, very successful loyalty program with our player circle. So we have
mm-hmm,
almost 600,000 active members now, and these people
mm-hmm,
are all registering product to redeem points to get and it free merchandise. But at the
yeah,
same time, we're verifying whether they have a counterfeit product because everything's serial numbered.
mm-hmm,
So that helps us police the counterfeit world, which is
mm-hmm,
a huge problem. But then we have this
mm-hmm,
loyalty program now. So if you use Player Circle and you play acoustic guitar, we're going to see what strings you bought, right? Or if you
mm-hmm,
bought a pedal tuner and a wiring kit for a pedal board, then you're the perfect guy to be a beta tester for a pedal board, or a
mm-hmm,
perfect guy for us to send a research questionnaire to that says, if you had a pedal board that expanded and contracted, and, would that entice you? Would you be interested in that? So we do all kinds of research, and a lot of times it's very fast and free because it's with our list of loyalty members, right? And then, of course, we go to the outside too. A lot of times we will buy list, or we'll try to find ways to reach customers that are not buying our product, that are buying a competitive product. So we do a bunch of that, but the ideation starts as intuition. Hey, I think it's a great idea for a pedal board that expands, right? And then do your due diligence. Make sure you got a business model that's going to be real, that there are enough people interested in it, right? And
Yep.
it's kind of fun because you see the process. And then once we start building them and prototypes, depending on the type of product is, sometimes you could easily build prototypes, sometimes they're costly. We beta test, we alpha and beta test with these folks. Sometimes we do focus groups, but we use our player circle loyalty members as a sounding board. That's just phenomenal for us. It's helped us get to market with some incredibly good products very fast, more quickly than we did before, and spot on, get it right.
Yeah.
And another thing then we do when we follow up, when we introduce a product, is we read every review on Amazon, Sweetwater, wherever. We want to know anything that's bothering a customer about that product,
You're
and
reading the reviews? I mean, someone on the team, or you have a software that aggregates them and then notifies you,
there's
or I
someone
mean,
on
that's
the
got to be a lot of
team,
work.
it is a lot of work. All of us kind of read, kind of randomly, but a few
Yeah.
of the guys, like if we're going to go into a certain new product area or enhance the one we have, we might, we would just, uh, I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
That's all right.
Um,
Scan the area.
yeah, no, some
So
pop-ups.
then,
How the pop-ups come.
you're researching reviews at that point in time.
Yes, yeah. So what happens
Yes.
is when we're thinking about expanding or improving on a particular product that we already have, we will
Yeah.
read every review for that tuner or whatever it may be, and
Yeah.
put it in a spreadsheet, all the bad reviews, and is this one just noise, or is this signal? And then
Yeah.
we go through those, and boy, does that guided us to perfect these products. I mean,
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. As a guitar builder and a player, you have a sense for when something's working right. That's why so many of the world's best trust D'Addario. Unmatched tone, perfect intonation, and strings made to the tightest tolerances in the industry. That reputation is no accident. It's the result of 400 years of being obsessed with quality and innovation. D'Addario. When you know, you know. Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world. Where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive, those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Gale Music. We are better together, so let's do this together. I love where we've been, and I'm excited about where we're going. This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like D'Addario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea. I didn't know that your players circle was doing that. Do you tell the customers ahead of time that that's a part of your player circles? Because I mean, someone like Tesla, they'd let people know that, hey, you could be one of our people who's testing our vehicles, and that's it. Some people incentivize. They want to do that. They want to be the person who's
we
testing
do
the
it probably,
automated
but not.
driving and such.
Yeah, we do it, but probably not enough.
Uh-huh.
We probably could get more mileage out of that feature because people do love it. They really
Yeah,
do.
it's the classic Shakespeare, that all the world is a stage and you can contribute a verse.
Yeah,
You're letting people contribute a verse
sure.
in
Yeah,
in the future of your products and
yeah.
the industry. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a great formula, but boy, I tell you, it's expensive. It's
I'm
like
sure.
30% of our marketing or giving away all that merchandise and managing it all.
Yeah.
It's a huge number.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think it sets us apart. And what I love about it is we automated our warehouse a bit more in the last 3 years. We put a ton of dough into that, and we
Hmm.
could ship out 1,000 orders a day if we had to. So, we
Yeah.
get anywhere from 200 to 500 player circle redemptions a day. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, and that's a lot of stuff to give away. But it ties us to that end consumer in a way directly, right? It's a direct
Yeah.
conduit to that customer. You could
Hmm.
speak to
Hmm.
him. You got his email address, you got his home address. You could send him a
Yeah.
replacement if he's not happy. And we
Yes.
go nuts with our customer service. We really go overboard with it.
Yeah, I was always one step removed for you guys because I was a retailer in Canada. But the Davidsons, the people who have run
Yeah,
your D'Addario
yeah,
Canada for years, are
amazing.
some of my favorite people in the industry.
Yeah,
And they did exactly what you're talking about. I
yeah,
could place a D'Addario order, and as long as it was in before, I don't know, like 4 o'clock that day,
yeah, yeah,
if I place it at 4 p.m., they'd still get it out the door, and
yeah,
I'd get that thing the next day. And none of my other suppliers could do that at the
yeah,
time. And that was
yeah.
something that really motivated me to do more business with D'Addario
Yeah.
for whatever I
Well, we
could,
try to make it as frictionless as possible. I mean, we could do better at times, but we do constantly win, vendor of the year awards in the industry for
Yep.
that service.
Hmm.
And I'm
Hmm.
proud of that. I think that's something my dad taught me.
Hmm.
My dad was like keen customer service interest, and my brother John, we just kind of lived that from day one. We knew that if we didn't disappoint because we would hear stories about them, like I mentioned names, but
Hmm.
competitors that were just like flippant about taking care of the customer. I mean, one of our major
Hmm.
competitors in one of our percussion products gives the worst service in the world. So many
Yep.
times the B2B clients are picking our product because they know they could get it and we're not going to screw up. If they order it and need it, they're going to get it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep.
That
Let's
should
talk
be a
about
ticket
the.
to the game, right?
Well, I think it is. And there's something about your company culture. And I don't know exactly what it is, but anyone who I've ever interacted with who's worked for D'Addario has been a lovely and kind person. And they've been always good to deal with. And so, I've not had much of interactions with you at this point in time, but there's something you've done. There's something that at the top of the family level, the board level, the CEOs, the C-suite, which trickles down through the organization, which you should be very proud of.
Yeah. I am, and it's funny you say that because, I graduated from Hofstra in 1972, and they asked me to make the commencement speech this year, and then I said yes, and then I was sorry I did because I'm thinking, what do you say today with what's going on to inspire somebody just going into the workforce or graduating
Hmm.
college to not be afraid and to be hopeful and to be energized and passionate about something? And
Hmm.
and I ended up picking three words that I kind of lecture on a lot when I talk to universities. And one of them
Hmm.
was element, finding your element. There's a real great book by Dr. Ken Robinson called The Element. Short read, really great for kids in school that,
Hmm.
talks about finding what you're passionate about and what you're good at earlier enough in life so that, you know, even if that's a hobby and it's a big part of your life, you want
Hmm.
something that you're passionate about. But if you can make that part of your work or your career, then you're never really going to work a day in your life. So I
Hmm.
spoke about element. I spoke about using your gut, just like I mentioned before, because for me, that's a big thing. I
Hmm.
find that sometimes people, as you get bigger and your organization's bigger, they just want to keep making another spreadsheet, and another
Yeah.
spreadsheet,
Get
instead
bogged
of
down in
making a
bureaucracy.
decision.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, you put the TV on election day night and they can have 4% of the vote in and they know who's going to win sometimes, right? Well,
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
is a point in time in every decision when your gut knows you have enough information and just
Hmm.
trust it, right? And that was one of the
Yeah.
points. But the third one, which I'm really kind of thrilled that you picked up on, was kindness
Hmm.
because there's a lack of kindness the way our leaders are just dealing with each other, it's an embarrassment, you know, the way the way this world is being run right now, and that's going to trickle down is because they're role models, and when you pick role models that aren't kind, you're going to have a lot of unkind people out there, and
Mm-hmm.
we've always strived to to really be kind to everyone that's in a stakeholder in our world here, whether it's an employee or it's a family member or a board member or a vendor or a customer. No one's more important than the other. Everyone must achieve some kind of level of success and recognition and for when we work together. And that's
Mm-hmm.
a mantra I learned from my family, that you don't beat up a vendor for price or payment terms just because you're going to get a better deal and then make it so
Mm-hmm.
that that guy can't make a living and he might go out of business. And then
Right.
what did you accomplish?
Yeah.
Right?
Good job.
So, yeah, I got a
Thank
lot of
God.
I got a lot of we've had a lot of big customers over the years that put such an emphasis on them making a huge profit margin, and
Yeah.
they don't realize that that is the most short-sighted um,
Mm-hmm.
business strategy you can possibly come up with,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to partner with the people you buy things from and the people you
Yes.
sell things to. And if everybody makes a fair profit, it's sustainable, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you could
Mm-hmm.
go on like our business has gone on very successfully. If I
Mm-hmm.
was hammering my suppliers, I might be in the same situation Henry Juskowitz was, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a company
Mm-hmm.
that's in trouble, right? And
Yep.
I never want to see that here. I want our vendors to say, if I got a new idea, I'm giving it to you first
Mm-hmm.
because you treat me kindly and you pay your bills
Yeah.
right away and
Yes.
you take care of me and I take care of you.
Yeah.
And so that was in my speech too. And that got a tremendous amount of positive commentary from everybody who passed the link around to the commencement exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
it was very gratifying to hear that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
people actually
It,
realize that this is missing right now. We're missing it. We're missing that kindness.
yeah. Yeah. If you're gonna, what is it? It's a. Yeah. I feel silly trying to remember it because I think I read it on like coffee shop signs. Those like A-frames and sidewalks, and I think I read it in one of these chalkboard signs that said, "Hey, listen, if you can be anything you want to be kind."
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes all the difference
Sure.
because we prioritize those people in our lives, and although some people think, oh no, you can't get ahead that way. Oh man,
The
you haven't lived
opposite.
long enough.
It's a
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
It's the
You're not thinking
exact
the
opposite.
long arc. You need to be the kind one.
The more you give, the more you receive.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah,
found that my whole life, and it's made a lot of happiness for me because you
yeah.
get more joy out of being generous and kind to people. And when they recognize that, that's a lot better than a stock option,
Mm-hmm,
with
mm-hmm.
a public company that I could cash in for whatever. That to
Right.
me is not recognition of your success.
Yeah. Now let's
Recognition
just.
is people recognizing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Now let's just suppose that for a second, because as an entrepreneur and as a leader, without even knowing you, I know you have to be disagreeable to a certain extent. Like
Oh,
it's not possible to do what you
I
do
could
without
be I
being
could be
disagreeable.
disagreeable, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. I think it's George Bernard Shaw who said that the agreeable man conforms to the world around him, and the disagreeable man insists on the world conforming to themselves. And therefore, all progress depends on that disagreeable man. You make no progress without
Yeah,
the
he's the
disagreeable.
roadblock. He's the
Yeah,
speed bump if he doesn't lay down.
or quality control.
Yeah,
Or the
yeah,
one that says, hey, this has got to stop. You can't treat people like that. There's all sorts of iterations of what
sure,
disagreeable thing
absolutely,
can
yeah,
be. But it can also be, if you're running the company and you're not the CEO, you're the board chief and chief innovation officer. But when you're in the C-suite level, or when you're running an organization, one of the biggest things that you have to do is be disagreeable when it comes to what's good enough. Hey, no, we can do better. No, this is not the standard. You have to be willing to say it. And so how do you remain kind and run a kind organization? Because really, when I think about, and I hope it's okay I name names here, when I think about Chris Griffiths and Tom Nania and Brian Vance and Daniel Mealy and all these people I work with at D'Addario, these are really many of the kindest people in our whole industry. Like, they're just lovely people that work with you. And so how do
I couldn't agree more.
be kind and disagreeable? How do you balance that?
With respect, I think that if you're respectful with the way everybody voices their opinion, and a lot of times, uh, earlier in my career, I wasn't respectful enough in that role, and I was impatient because one of these guys that thinks he has the answer right away. Unfortunately, I did have a pretty good track record, so you know, I wanted to keep rolling, but I think I might have rolled over a couple of really great ideas along the way because they weren't in line with my ideas, but there are ways with humor and with respect to communicate when you're making the call, right? And the reason you're making the call. And I sometimes kid Ned, sometimes says, Ned, don't make us walk outside to see whose name's on the building, as a joke. But if you use humor, you could kind of get the message across, because there's no one way to do anything, is there? So if I felt really strongly about something, that I had the right solution for a particular problem we were stuck on, and unfortunately Ned thinks like I do, and he thinks the same thing about his idea, that's somebody's going to have to be the referee, and it's usually the guy with his name on the building, right? But you want to do it respectfully, right? But I've learned to actually a lot of times just say, this is not important, and it's going to work either way. If you think that's the better way, let's go that way. Only when I really feel strongly that something could be improved, or the route that they're on is not going to get us to the best place, do I really speak up. And I plan on continuing to do that to an extent. I'm not going to sit on weekly meetings. I'm actually taking a 3.5-month sabbatical starting in the middle of July, so that the teams that I've been working on can actually function without me, and see how they do, and who rises up to the challenge of making these decisions that I might make just intuitively or on the spot while we're working together, or convince them to go with a certain approach. Who's going to step up and start to do that when I'm in my absence? So this is going to be a wonderful experiment, and I happen to be in the middle of designing a new home. I'm building a smaller downsized home, and I'm going to devote my time to that, getting the design and the permits and all of that during this time. And then when I'm done with that period, I'm going to come back on a newly defined role, which is defining itself as we go through the sabbatical, right?
Yes.
So it's kind of an experiment in cooking without a recipe book. Learning how to cook in the kitchen without listening to some other famous chef. So we're gonna see what comes out, and I think it's going to be actually fun and really good for everybody, and empower a lot of really smart people to come forward, and let's see what you could do. I know we have these people here. We have them. There's no question we have them.
Yeah. And another classic entrepreneurial tell. You're taking 3 months off to dive deep into a project of designing a house, huh? That's, you really know how to vacation.
Yeah. If I try to do it, man, unfortunately, I lost my partner of 50 plus years, my late wife, Janet, and she always did all the home design work and stuff, and I just threw my opinions in every now and then. But I lost her 4 years ago to cancer, and we had built this house, which is just way too big for me alone, and just kind of a waste of resources to keep it running. Takes up too much of my time. So I'm designing something really cool. I don't think I'll have an electric bill. I want to try to do something that's really innovative and off the grid and different. And so I'm kind of into it, so I can keep my innovation brain going, without necessarily being here stifling everybody from growing into being the innovators of the future for the
Yeah.
company.
Well, that's great. I look forward to reading all about it in Architectural Digest one day. Yeah,
Maybe, you never know.
yeah.
It's coming out great, actually. I mean, it's very exciting to do. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's impossible to do something like that effectively and still function at the same level in a job like I have, because I dive in deep and
Hmm.
you know, I wouldn't be neglectful. I think this is a really great idea to have a side project right now that's going to distract me and let my folks kind of learn how to handle this stuff, or a good part
Hmm.
of it, without me. I'll
Hmm.
stick my nose in every now and then and cheerlead for him.
Yeah, wonderful. So, Jim, I want to go back to something that we discussed earlier on when we talked about this sort of experiment I've been having when I question. I got to tell you, when I experimenting with the idea of strings and the difference they can make, the conversation I want to have with people is about the differences that each string makes, and the conversation I get is no, I use D'Addario because they're perfectly consistent, and I never fuck with which ones I'm using because I just want it to be that unknown variable. But that's a problem when we're trying to get acceptance into new ideas, and if you're constantly innovating, you're constantly trying new things. I mean, you got to be happy that they think you're reliable, but at the same time, you also want them to try the new stuff, right? So,
Well, yeah, I mean,
is
and
this?
yeah, no question. I mean, this you've identified spot on something that kind of, I'm not going to say bothers me, but it's when
Mm-hmm,
somebody says, "Oh, your strings are the most consistent," they're not
mm-hmm,
saying they're the greatest. They're saying that they're consistent. Like there's almost there's something missing in there, because we think they're the
mm-hmm,
greatest at the same time while they're consistent, right? But what I
mm-hmm,
think happens is we have so many offerings and we keep innovating, like two different coatings and all kinds of things in the line, that
mm-hmm,
people don't take the time to understand it. It's
mm-hmm,
very difficult to the marketing, you know, with all these names and everything. It's very difficult.
mm-hmm,
Like, I was just traveling back from a family wedding, and you go to Delta and they got like 7 different loyalty name,
right.
classes. Like, and it's just like, why are you confusing me? Just tell me I'm a good customer, and treat everyone the same, right? But
Yes.
in the case of marketing, it's very difficult with a technical product like ours not to get technical to explain the differences, right? Yet
Mm-hmm,
today's marketing is most effective when it's got few words. These nobody wants to read anything. They don't
mm-hmm,
want to read as much as they used to. They want to do podcasts and they want to hear you tell them stuff, right, while
mm-hmm,
they're driving or whatever they do. But
mm-hmm,
it, when I first started the business over and we first launched D'Addario as a brand, my whole focus was on showing that we are technical people, and you know we've phosphor bronze is selected because of this reason, and we use a hex
mm-hmm,
core because of this reason, and here's a picture and this is what it looks like, right?
mm-hmm,
Nobody did
mm-hmm,
that stuff. They just had a
mm-hmm.
package and they showed it and they made some puffery type statements about the
Yeah,
strings, which
yeah.
usually were bullshit. And and we tried to do things in a way that informed the customer. That is not the way marketing necessarily is done today, unless you're in a technical video.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So it is difficult to explain why our capo design is so much better than everybody else's. And
mm-hmm,
after we have our we finish this, I'll send you a link to some video that a gentleman did that randomly on his own. I
mm-hmm,
discovered the perfect capo, and he discovered ours, and he discovered it all for the same reasons we designed it.
mm-hmm,
Okay,
mm-hmm.
and the problem with most capos, you put them on and you've got to retune because they've got
Yeah,
a giant spring on there that could hold your car up while you're changing a flat
yeah.
tire,
Too
and
much
they're
tension.
squeezing, right. And
Mm-hmm,
I always
mm-hmm,
said to myself, well, when I play with my fingers, when I fret a string, I could do vibrato, I can make it sharp, I could be a little loose with it, and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
but I could play in tune, right? Because my finger has a certain kind of softness to it, and it has a skin on it. So that hard
mm-hmm,
skin acts to hold the string down, but underneath is this soft flesh that, unless you really press hard, you don't pull the string that far sharp.
mm-hmm,
So we try to duplicate the actual feel of your finger in the
mm-hmm,
rubbers we use. So there's 2 layers of rubber. There's a soft foam inside, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a slightly harder skin on the outside. And it's remarkable because our NS Pro Plus capo, you could
Mm-hmm.
put it on any radius neck and it works. And you
Mm-hmm.
could put it on a 12 string and it works. And
Mm-hmm.
you only have to tighten it down till it doesn't buzz. And if you put a tuner on, you'll see you haven't changed the tuning unless you pulled things sideways, you put it on
Mm-hmm.
wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know how to put capo on,
Mm-hmm.
you're rarely retuning, you know.
Yep.
And I always kind of get frustrated because I'll go to shows and you'll see people constantly using one of the most popular capos, which we know pulls it out of tune because the
Mm-hmm.
guitarist, the player is being handed a guitar that some roadie tuned perfectly for him with the capo on it already. He isn't
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the problem that the
Right.
everyday guy has that doesn't have a roadie doing that for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
when I play in my living room, I want my guitar in tune. I don't want to have to tune it every time I move my capo up and down the neck because I have a very limited singing range. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's we solve a problem and then try to communicate that solution to somebody. I just
Mm-hmm.
spent 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
describing that to you. Nobody's going to listen to that in a video. You know, we have to figure out how to really show that in action and why it works. And that's the challenge, right? Why is our film coated excess string the perfect coated string? I mean, the coating is 1/10,000th of an inch in thickness.
Mm-hmm.
That's 1/30th as thick as a saran wrap in your kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't change the feel of the tone of the string. You put
Mm-hmm.
them on and you don't even know that they're coated. And then they last a long time and they're more durable because the adhesion is better to the winding. So, all those things, they're all technical to
Yeah. Yeah.
communicate. And people aren't just that interested in why. They
No,
want to
but
know
you can
why.
talk about why it is. You can
Yeah,
talk about
could,
the fact that, hey, you want your strings to last longer?
yeah,
Do you hate changing your guitar strings too often? You
yeah,
know, or would you rather spend more time
right.
playing guitar and less time changing strings?
Now, what was the name of that guy? Simon Sinek, who wrote that book, The Why.
Start with why. Yeah.
Start with why, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Is
Yeah,
the
Simon Sinek. Yeah.
perfect segue there, right? So
Yeah.
they're not really that interested in how it works or
Hmm.
how you make it. They're interested in why you make it,
Yeah.
right? So that's
Yeah.
today's marketing. If you and trying to tie in the why,
Hmm.
uh, so that somebody understands, okay, we're solving this problem, and we don't need to tell you how we did it, but trust me, we solved it, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
You might get to them. It's tricky, you know.
Yeah.
So looking at our string site, um, we tried to make a string finder, and it's a nice little program, but it's not universally pinpoint accurate for everybody. You put in certain
Hmm.
parameters, and it tells you what golf ball to buy, right? The same kind
Yeah.
of thing. Um,
Yeah.
so
The
so
part
we're
that
playing
I'm,
around now. We're playing around now with artificial intelligence to kind of try to write some of that code.
yeah. Okay. The part that I want to explore with you is, let's take a more drastic example. So when you have bass guitar strings, most people are playing with I don't know, your EXPs, a normal wound nickel string. I mean, which is what we all think about a bass guitar string. We mostly think about a wound nickel string, right? And so, but when I play a bass with flat wound strings on it, it's such a different experience. Now I play differently. I approach it. I might play the same line. I might play a little bit differently. I might choose to do a little bit less. I mean, you don't slide your fingers so much on a flat wound string, and so therefore, I might finger out the notes, whereas I might be used to sliding those notes in a particular way. And so you have a different approach. And then you make this thing in the middle of a ground wound string, and so that is something that's really interesting. Also, that affects. It's like having a new bass.
Mm.
You get a whole new bass for 40 or $50, by changing out the strings. But if you're just seen as the reliable one, and I don't want to screw around with my strings, for me, I guess most people want known variables, and for me, I want inspiration. And so I'm always, and I see guitar strings as a cheap way, a really
Yeah.
cheap and inexpensive way for you to basically get almost a whole new guitar sometimes by being able to just swap
Yeah.
out from something like that, from
Yeah, well, one of
a.
my first big successes when we started the D'Addario brand was our half round bass strings.
Mm-hmm.
And at the
Did I
time,
use someone else's branding? Sorry, is ground
no,
wound someone else's
no,
branding?
no.
Like half off? Okay.
Ground wound is actually the definition of the process because we grind it.
Ah, I see.
And
Okay.
our
Half round.
competitors, when they came out with theirs, they called them ground wounds. But
I
it's
see.
just kind of like saying, round wound, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
my dad in the 50s was making all the strings for Dan Electro.
Mm-hmm.
And Nate Daniels had a factory in Neptune, New Jersey, where he made the amplifiers and guitars.
Mm-hmm.
And, his guitars sounded and played great for like no money at all. I think they were like $59 or $49 at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And when he put a bass out, he wanted a bass string, that he could buy cheap enough to, and everybody thought that bass strings back then had to be flat wound because bass fiddle strings are flat wound, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
all they did was they poured it over stuff being made and print a lot of the German manufacturers, flat wound strings that were being made on upright bass.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they changed the alloy from a 300 stainless, which isn't magnetic, to a 400 stainless, which is, and they've
Mm-hmm.
got an electric bass string. And the first like Fender bass strings my dad made for Leo Fender in the early 50s, were 430 stainless flat wounds and, really smooth and pretty dead sounding strings, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nothing like you hear today with slap playing and,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the whole, 60s and 70s when
Harmonic
Stanley
overtones and
Clarke and all
such.
these
Yeah, yeah.
guys were playing solo. Jaco Pastorius started soloing on the bass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And John Entwistle, perfect example. So my dad developed this very inexpensive round wound string to make for Dan Electro, and they never marketed a replacement string for those basses. Believe it or not, they never put a package set out.
Hmm.
And John Entwistle bought one of those basses when they recorded the My Generation album, their first album, The Who,
Mm-hmm.
and he took the strings off and he put them on his Fender bass, and he was recording My Generation, taking the solo, and I think he broke a
Mm-hmm.
string, and he had to go and buy another bass. And there's a video where he talks about it, and Pete Townsend talks about it too. But they discovered that really bright, cool sounding string by accident because my father was asked to make a cheap string. It was easy to
Mm-hmm.
make,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But everybody thought bass strings had to be flat wound because
Yeah,
bass fiddles had flat wound strings on them, right? And
yeah.
and when we started the Dario brand, I said, well, maybe there's something in between, and I called it the third kind of string.
Mm-hmm.
And I started with an oversized round wound string, put it through a centerless grinder that ground the outer surface off. So like we
Mm-hmm.
might take to make a 105, we would make about a 112, and we take 7,000ths off with the grinding process, which was very precise.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was a huge sensation because nobody was marketing anything like that. And
Mm-hmm.
that put us on the map in the bass string business. And then we put round wound XL bass strings out, which were really bright, like the Dan Electro strings. We
Mm-hmm.
captured a large share of the market. But what Rotosound did was basically, for John Entwistle, copied, James Howe copied the construction of that Dan Electro string and
Mm-hmm.
made the strings that were the Rotosound swing bass strings that were huge success in the
Mm-hmm.
60s and
Mm-hmm.
70s because they didn't want a flat wound string, right? They didn't want just a
Right.
flat wound string. They wanted different sounds. And that was a lesson I learned, and from that point we just constantly try to experiment with different ways of getting different tones and different feels and so on from bass and any kind of string.
Yeah. But how do you get people to try it? So, I mean, not that we can solve this right now. I just thought it would be interesting to discuss that philosophically,
Yeah,
as I've been experimenting with this question, people tell
yeah,
me that they just want consistency, but that means they're not experimenting.
right. I
And,
agree.
I guess if we look at the law of diffusion of innovation, I mean, you just talked about Simon Sinek, and I learned the law of diffusion of innovation, which is not his. It's a Harvard economist concept from the 60s. It talks about the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, late majority, and the laggards, this sort of division. And anyone who wants to look that up, go to TED, TED.com, and Simon Sinek. I think he's still one of the top 10 TED
Yeah,
Talks in history.
unbelievable.
This Start With Why.
I know.
It's almost 20 years old, but watch it. It's life-changing. I've been
Yeah,
talking about it ever since I saw it.
I've watched it 10
And,
times.
yeah, exactly. And so you can look at this innovation curve, and it's normal that only a small percentage of people will do it. But, on a business, as your business scales, Jim, I mean, you're at the point where, so if we look at something like robot tuners, which are something that our industry laughs at, the Gibson robot tuner, that if someone like, I don't know, Tom Anderson or Nick Huber or someone released a robot tuner and they sold the volume of robot tuners that Gibson did, it would be a huge success. But because Gibson did it, the amount they sold was a laughable flop, and so you get to this certain point where the uptake, if you don't get a certain amount of uptake, it seems like it's not viable when your company is so big. And so, playing the long game, playing the long arc, do you think about that with product that, hey, listen, it's going to take 10, 20, 30 years before
but the
this
product
is
has to
really
be
accepted?
right? The product has to
Yeah,
be right.
of
And in the
course.
case of the robot tuners, on
Yeah,
those that particular iteration of guitars they put
yeah,
out where everyone had to have the tuners, right?
yeah.
And that it had
It wasn't just the
and
tuners.
it had a 0 fret,
That's
and the
right. And the
tuners were
flatter
heavy,
fretboard. Yeah,
and the
yeah,
yeah, and the tuners were heavy,
yeah. Yes,
and
yes.
they didn't work that great, right? Now,
No.
if they just said you could get this guitar the way you have it now, or you
Yeah,
could get it upgraded with this absolutely perfect, lightweight, fully
yes.
functional robotic tuner, yes, it would have been successful, right? It
So,
wasn't
so
successful
maybe a
because they
bad
didn't get the
example,
yeah, but
but
the point I'm making is that is always more factors involved, right?
yeah.
That's the point is, so many times people say, well, we tried that before and it didn't work. Yeah, but we didn't know how to do this, and that was missing, and that was missing. Do it over with these new things we know now, and maybe it's not a bad idea, right?
Okay, let's take an example that isn't so controversial. The F5 mandolin came out at the end of the orchestra period, the
Mm,
mandolin orchestra period, and was out of production for 20 years until Bill Monroe came along and played a music that didn't yet exist 20 years previously. But probably because of this instrument, because the F5 doesn't have as much sustain, it doesn't have as much bottom end, it's very choppy and percussive in its nature. But that shaped the sound of Bill Monroe, and what we now call bluegrass is the F5 mandolin. And so it existed, but was taken out of production. I mean, the Les Paul itself, whether, I have my issues with the Les Paul design, but it doesn't matter. The fact is, there millions of people love the Les Paul. But it was also taken out of production. All of the offset guitars, the Jaguars and Music Mans from Fender, were taken out of production, at a certain point in time because they didn't have enough uptake in the marketplace at a certain point, and they
yeah,
disappeared.
it's a
And
lazy
so,
market. They want to buy Stratocasters and Les Pauls, and they're lazy at picking, you know, new ideas. It's just always been.
yeah, but there's brands always innovating, and the guitar is always evolving. I mean,
Hmm.
always.
Yeah,
If we look at the
there's great
first
stuff out
100
there.
years of the modern guitar from 1850 to 1950, there's more than 10 variations of guitar that are still made today. If we look at the classical, flamenco, the resophonic guitar, the archtop, the
I mean, look
amplified
at
archtop,
headless. I mean, Ned was way ahead of his time with headless. Now there's a lot of guys taking up headless. You know,
Yes,
small
yes,
boutique
exactly.
guys, and especially with the
So,
extended range guitars.
right. So right now, brands like Strandberg and Dingwall can't keep up with production, while the legacy brands currently are trying to dump inventory. And it doesn't mean that they're.
Mm,
I don't mean to say it's a bad thing. I just mean that when you occupy a large percentage of the marketplace, you're much more susceptible to the ebbs and flows, right?
yeah,
Um, but there are brands right now which are doing way more business than most people think they are because they're not paying attention because they're looking in the traditional avenues. They're saying, why don't I see these guitars on TV, or why don't I hear them on the radio? I'm like,
mm,
who's watching TV? And
yeah,
otherwise, unless and
yeah.
who's listening to the radio?
How many songs in the top 100 have a guitar solo compared to 30 years ago? You know,
Yeah, but is the top 100 relevant?
no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not even
So
relevant.
how many songs that have extremely high views on YouTube have guitar solos is a different
A lot.
question than the top
Yeah,
100. A
yeah,
lot.
a lot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
I
not
agree with you.
only
It's just it's not in the mainstream anymore. So, like when, Michael Jackson did, had Van Halen play
Thriller.
his solo, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was a big deal, right?
Yep.
And it was on MTV, and it was huge to see, that that he played on the record, right? And that was important, but that's all missing right now. Then that high end volume, the record business is not there, and see, it's a different world.
But music recording is still happening. It's just
Yeah.
not. So what changed with the record business is distribution. Is it's accessible now. Anybody can record a song in their living room on their laptop, or their bedroom, upload a song to the internet, and there it is. It's out there. Some of the biggest stars in the world. I mean, not guitar players, people like Justin Bieber. Were kids just recording stuff in their bedroom.
Yeah.
And if it's great and people love it, you can't stop them from sharing it. But the
Hmm.
record industry came from people saying, going to Mississippi or to Memphis or to Chicago and saying, wow, we don't have music like this in New York. Hey, you should record a record. Well, I don't have any money, mister. Well, I have money. Let me record you, but sign this piece of paper so no one else can record you. And I can sell records in New York, and I can sell them in
Hmm.
Memphis, and I can sell them in LA, and we'll all get rich and famous together. They said, gee, golly, mister, let's do that. The musicians didn't do that. It was always venture capitalists. It was always entrepreneurs who said, oh, I think I can sell this.
Yeah.
And today, there's no value in the distribution of music because you can distribute it for free.
Yeah. And
But
they
that's what the
can't make
record
any money.
industry
Well,
is.
unfortunately, the musicians have a hard time making any money at it. They get paid pittance.
I agree, but that's mostly always been the case. There's a few people made a lot of money, but I don't remember a time in history where moms and dads said, hey, you should be a musician because you'll be rich. That never
No, but
happened.
if you
Come
look
on.
at the 60s, you look at the amount of music I grew up with, 60s and 70s, the
Mhm.
amount of acts that had hit records that actually they made money on those records, and
Yeah.
they kind of drove their tours and so on. And there's just so many groups, but it's more difficult today to get that kind of level of attendance at concerts without being a superstar, without being a Beyonce or something, or a Taylor Swift. And it's almost the same thing that's happened to our middle class. You've got the singer-songwriters over here that are like their volume of business is so small compared to these super giant acts over here, and then what's in the middle, it's not you don't have the Who and the Kinks and the Jethro Tulls and all of these other bands in the middle all making a ton of money and having a ton of people see them. It's a lot smaller, it's split into to the haves and the have-nots almost. You don't like our economies.
Uh, I see what you're saying, although I remain a little more optimistic about it. I think that there's different streams. I think that the creativity is in different places currently.
Mm, yeah,
That
good
people
point.
are excited about technology and about the possibilities. Whereas you used to, a guitar was or a drum set was an easy place to be creative, but these days, it's easy to be creative on a computer or on a
Yeah,
phone and create something, to draw. I mean, you
that's
like
true.
to
Yeah,
you like to work in CAD and then, or Rhino or whatever programs you're using to do to SolidWorks, I think you mentioned, so that you can be creative in that aspect. And that
yep.
creativity has just shifted to new possibilities,
Yeah, you're right.
you
You're
know.
right.
Yeah,
It's
and
just not
so.
getting rewarded and recognized the same way. That's my point. You know,
Mhm,
I think the record business did a horrible job of transitioning into the digital world, and they tried to stifle, they tried to keep a status quo, which is never possible. And
mhm,
they held back what could have been a fairer, kinder model to all
mhm,
musicians, if they were
mhm.
just a little bit more generous with their share of it. And I think
Yeah.
that it would have been better, and it would have nurtured more people to be interested in making music. And instead, they made it hard for the little guy to make enough money at it. Because he doesn't have that Albert Grossman recording Bob Dylan and Columbia supporting him anymore. It's like very few people get that deal, you know,
Mhm.
and you got to do it yourself. So it means you got to record it at home. You got to figure out how to publish it. You get it on Spotify or
Yeah.
Pandora or whatever, and good luck and see what happens, right? Maybe you go viral and
Yeah.
you get lucky.
Yeah, but the cost to entry is way lower.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you watch the Bohemian Rhapsody movie with Queen, they literally sold their van to buy 8 hours of the worst recording studio time in the middle of the week from midnight to like 8 a.m. to record their first album. They had to
Yeah.
sell a
No,
car to
I
make
know.
it happen.
Yeah.
I've been a
Yeah.
part of those overnight recording sessions while we're
Yeah.
highly caffeinated, trying to stay awake because we can't afford the good time, but now you can record a great album
Yeah. At
on
home.
$1,000 laptop or
I know.
less,
I
and
know.
so that's there's an
That's true.
upside to that as well, and so let's I have a interesting observation and question for you. When you talk about that transition of the record industry, the drum industry is going through this, or has gone through it
Hugely.
at this point in
Yeah.
time,
It's huge.
and for whatever reason, none of the major acoustic drum companies thought it was worthwhile to transition into digital drums. And most recently, Roland has bought DW,
Mhm.
and but DW or Pearl or Tama or Ludwig, Gretsch, none of these guys thought it was worthwhile to develop digital processes. They stuck with the acoustic drum set, which everyone except for the drummer in their house hated. I love drums. I'm a drummer myself, but there's a high cost to learning and playing drums around other people, right? Like, and digital drums solved a lot of this. I owned a music school with our store for a lot of years, and there was a lot of parents who were like, "Oh, I'll spend more money for the quiet one, than I will for the other one." And pop music got more simple, and you can record in your laptop without a drummer at all, and this transition this way. And so, how is D'Addario committed to acoustic music or music in general? Is there a part of your business that's interested or paying attention to the electronic side of it? Because we've just seen the drums, the horns haven't gone away, the woodwinds haven't gone away, the electric guitar hasn't gone away. They're interfaces, but the drum as a percussion as an interface has really suffered greatly because of digital replacement. And what do you think about that and what the future could look like for the percussion industry?
Well, it's funny that you asked that question because we have a product right now. It's Sensory Percussion Partnership. They did the software, we did the hardware,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still in development. But it's launched, but it's slightly incomplete and becoming complete very shortly. And so it's this company Soundhouse did this software, and it creates the sensor system can create multiple zones on a drum that trigger whatever. You could put your curtains down on stage, you could lights, you could grab whatever sounds you want, and it's really amazing actually. So if you go on our website and look for Evans Hybrid is the way we're marketing it,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see a bunch of videos and you'll see what we're accomplishing there. We're not successful at it yet because having a good cymbal and a good hi-hat sensor, which in our
Mm-hmm.
opinion, no electronic drums have at the
That's
moment,
right.
even
I would agree.
Roland, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, having that perfected will take this product and make it in a class by itself where it could become an electronic drum kit, or it
Mm-hmm.
could become the future of percussion by having all these possibilities available to you if you're
Mm-hmm.
somebody that likes to dive into programming and using technology. So
Mm-hmm.
we've been behind this for about a year and a half. And one of the things that I've been working on with my engineering team is some incredible cymbal sensors. And
Mm-hmm.
we're this close to pilot production on the regular cymbal and on a hi-hat version that when we've demoed this for buyers at
Mm-hmm.
our biggest retail customers, they were like, this is the only solution that actually does the job. And so we actually identified this as an area that we should be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working on it, and we've invested a lot of money in it. And we
Mm-hmm.
have some really good people here working on it, and we're hopeful that when we beta launch these cymbal sensors that we will start to see people embrace this and give it the recognition it deserves. And yet we might want to partner with a drum company on something like this that might have a platform for this to sit on better than
Mm-hmm.
we do, because we're not an instrument company.
Mm-hmm.
We're an accessory company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this could be triggered by our DB1 mesh heads This could
Hmm.
be triggered by regular heads. So, if you could play quietly or you could play on a regular kit with it as well. And there's some great videos out there, some really great players doing some stuff that you probably enjoy if you go on the site and you check it out. So there's more
Hmm.
to come on that. And um, we 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 probably should be thinking similarly for guitar, because maybe somebody will eventually come across with a guitar innovation that could change the amount of people playing acoustic guitars. I mean, look at the acoustic drum business. I mean, it's literally, I think the last time I looked at the numbers, it's, sales today in units are about 40% what they were in 2004. So,
Hmm.
for us, we make a lot of drum heads. We're now the largest selling drum head. But, our volume would be double if the acoustic guitar business didn't get eaten up by electronic drums.
Acoustic drum
I
business. Yeah.
bought a set of electronic drums for my son, who's a really good drummer, when he went to college, so he could practice in the dorm. You know,
Hmm.
uh, this is going on all over the world, and you got areas like Japan where there isn't a lot of living space, so you can't have
Yeah.
your kid have a set of drums in the basement. you know,
Hmm.
they can't. They practice in vans or rehearsal studios. That's about it. So they need something that doesn't make noise, too
Hmm.
much, volume. So there's multitude of needs there. Obviously, the convenience of an electronic kit. Carrying it is easier. You've got all your sounds with you all the time. And, you know,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, there's so many advantages to it that I'm not surprised it took off. But the
Hmm.
cymbals have been, I think, a huge weakness.
Yeah.
No matter what you listen to, and there's a lot of them out there, right? I mean, it wasn't just V drums that came along. There were predecessors to V drums, and
Yep.
and newer people to the market. I think what we have is truly unique, and right at the moment is still in the stage, I would say, of being 75% developed. When we get these cymbal senses out and get the software right,
Hmm.
it's going to be an exciting thing to watch to see how it goes. I think that we got a strong possibility of making some noise here.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. As a guitar builder and a player, you have a sense for when something's working right. That's why so many of the world's best trust D'Addario. Unmatched tone, perfect intonation, and strings made to the tightest tolerances in the industry. That reputation is no accident. It's the result of 400 years of being obsessed with quality and innovation. D'Addario, when you know, you know. Are you serious about the business of guitar? Then you need to join us on Patreon. We're building a future where guitar makers are able to live prosperous lives making instruments that inspire the musical experience, which helps to create a more beautiful world. Where others who are passionate about the guitar can thrive, those who help in the promotion and resale, trade shows, writing of books and articles are supported as a valuable part of the community. A community where we explore with curiosity and encourage those around us in their endeavors. With a community effort, we can accomplish far more than we can individually. So let's be serious about your guitar business and join us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Jamie Gale Music. We are better together, so let's do this together. I love where we've been, and I'm excited about where we're going. This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like D'Addario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Jim, as we sort of come to a close here, I always like to give it back to our guest. Is there a topic or something that you wanted to discuss today, or a question that you thought I might ask you that we should address? If I were maybe a better interviewer, I might have asked you.
Well, I mean, I don't think without going into politics, which is a dangerous thing to do these days, and is not really relevant to the overall point that I'd like to make. But
Yep.
um, I've been trying to manufacture my products in America and control my own destiny for my entire career.
Yep.
And I am saddened by the state that our country is in, because what we did was we allowed short-term business thinking
Hmm.
to drive us to think that we could safely source things from low labor cost environments forever in a sustainable fashion. And what we did was we did this for 2 generations now.
Hmm.
So like the example I gave earlier in the conversations, when I tried to identify vendors of die-cast aluminum parts in America, there were
Hmm.
none.
Hmm.
And also, we don't have the ability to finish them because our environmental laws are much more stringent, and the plating and those kind of things create hazardous wastes. And,
Hmm.
you know, it's not viable, but it's viable for us to do it in Taiwan or China or
Right.
wherever else. I mean, we're
As if we're
still
not
not,
sharing the same
it's still,
atmosphere.
yeah, it's not sustainable there either. Okay.
Hmm.
And that keeps me up at night because I feel kind of powerless in
Hmm.
terms of making a big enough difference, you know. But I think the key thing that we've learned from this now is that many of those skilled people that knew how to do that stuff here
Hmm.
and were forced to teach people to do it somewhere in a foreign country,
Hmm.
they're not with us anymore. So we
Hmm.
can't even call them up and say, hey, could you come back here and show me how to make that tool and die for a die cast aluminum part so I can make them here in America again? That's, so just throwing tariffs at people and thinking that's going to force this thinking that we can make stuff here, it's years and years before you'll get a factory up and running. It doesn't just
Hmm.
happen overnight. I build
Hmm.
factories. I have 7 of
Hmm.
them here in Farmingdale,
Hmm.
7 buildings where we make a multitude of different things here, right? There's 800 people making stuff here on Long Island, the most expensive place in the country, and we're doing it and making a profit. And the way we did it was we never gave up investing back in the infrastructure of our business. We were patient before we took our dividends. I could have made a lot more money a lot faster and be home sitting by the pool somewhere with hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank if I
Hmm.
wanted to, but I didn't. I chose the slow, patient route. And
Hmm.
now I have a balance sheet that's secure, and I have a business where we're highly automated because we built that stuff. And if other companies did that, we wouldn't be in the trouble that we are in. And
Hmm.
how do we teach this? How do we teach people to think this way? You can't think about the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. You need to think of the next 7 years. When
Hmm.
you're making a decision to do something, I always think of it it's big long game for me. I don't
Hmm.
think of it as, oh, what am I going to get next month? You
Hmm.
know, that's just so short-sighted and greedy that it then never crosses my mind to think that way. And fortunately, we've been able to sustain a business doing it that way. And it's very rewarding to be in a strong position, but it's also frustrating that we can't do some of the things that we'd love to do here easily because we don't have the expertise here in America again. We've
Hmm.
taught these people how to make things better than we can now because we don't have the people that taught them.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and I think that that's the core of our problems right now, industrially. When we say we want to bring manufacturing back here, that's all great and easy to say in the Oval Office or in a boardroom or wherever you're making those decisions. But the decisions and the action and the success takes place on a factory floor.
Hmm.
Toyota Lean will tell you, you go to the Gemba, you go to the workplace. When an engineer gets hired at Toyota, he sits and watches in the factory for 6 months, watches everything before he does anything because you don't know what's going on unless you know what's going on your factory floor. So we
Hmm.
don't make decisions in a conference room when it comes to a work cell or how a machine's going to operate. Our guys are actively involved on where it happens, and we listen to the people that are doing the work, right? They know more than when you do sometimes. We've lost
Hmm.
all of that. We
Hmm.
just, we think you could just make these robotic decisions in a conference room somewhere and it's actually going to work. And you're not really considering all the unexpected consequences around those decisions. So I'm a little
Hmm.
fearful that we're expecting too much from some short-term changes in the way we're dealing with trade, and we're pissing a lot of people off at the same time. But the biggest problem is we don't have those skill sets here. And
Hmm.
when I went to high school, I loved print shop, metal shop, a wood shop. I was passionate
Mm-hmm.
about those things. Most of our schools don't have those programs anymore. It's not cool for somebody to do that, right? It's not cool that that's your career to be a machinist. On Long Island here, when the aerospace business was big, it was so easy to draw from the workforce and get first class machinists like
Mm-hmm.
crazy. They were all working at subcontractors, working for Grumman and the other aerospace companies on Long Island, and that's all gone. It's and those guys now, I got guys retiring that are in their 60s, and they're not going to be easy to replace.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, there's a bright side. I think that robotics has really interested a lot of the younger kids. I know
Mm-hmm.
I've got a couple of grandkids that were heavily into it. They were my grandson James, who's 18, he just started college. He was on a robotics team for 2 years, and the competitions did very well.
Mm-hmm.
And they're interested in making things again. But I'm trying. I have the Generation 5 here for internships, a bunch of them, and
Mm-hmm.
some of them are actively involved in getting their hands dirty in the factory and
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to make things because there is a certain reward. I mean, I get a tremendous satisfaction walking the factory floor and sometimes seeing a machine that I put together and designed in 1975 still running, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful uh, feeling to see that something you created is still adding value, right? And we gave all that away as a nation. We just blew it. We gave it away. I never believed in that. My dad taught me that. And one of the reasons we didn't stay with Martin Guitars when he sold Darko was
Mm-hmm.
that they wanted us to move two machines to Japan and teach them how to make strings.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was on the board and he was a VP of Martin, but they instructed him to pack up two machines. And he just point blank said, those machines, I'll be standing on the loading dock and those machines will go out over my dead body. And it was like the Cuban Missile Crisis. So he just wouldn't let them have the machines. He says, we're not
Mm-hmm.
going to teach them how to do what we do. We've got hundreds of trade secrets. Why do we want to
Mm-hmm.
give them away? What is that going to get us from long term? And that taught me a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
that was an incredible example to me. And we kind of modeled our business around that. And it worked.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know,
All right. So let's counterpoint for a second. What's the upside? So that's
the
the
upside
downside of offshoring. What did we accomplish?
when we offshored, or what do
Yeah.
we accomplish now?
No, no. What did we accomplish when we offshored?
We became more of a service economy
Mm-hmm.
and we created, I think, some super high tech industries, software and chips and things that now other people are starting to outdo us in because we gave them the financial base under it, right? But I think
Mm-hmm.
that for an interim, we became this wonderful country, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that's sustainable, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I worry about that. I don't know enough about it myself, to be honest. I mean, when you hear stories of Intel, who used to be the most advanced chip
Mm-hmm.
maker, being in trouble, and us having to rely on foreign sources for chips, that scares me. But we did develop that, and we are the experts. One thing wonderful about this country is all the immigrants and all the different cultures that are here, they turn out to be a really great stew for
Mm-hmm.
innovation.
Mm-hmm.
You have so many different vantage points and different uh, backgrounds to people in our nation
Mm-hmm.
that I think that that's one of the reasons we've been so creative in every way, whether it's music or movies or art or machine design or
Mm-hmm.
chips. I think that's a big plus, and it still is a big plus. Now, how do we harness it? And how do we incentivize it so that we get back some of the core stuff
Mm-hmm.
that's your core security, your financial security? I'm big on having very little debt and having a balance sheet that the banks want to come and lend me money instead of
Mm-hmm.
me borrowing you know money
Yeah.
without the right credit terms. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um it's there's something that really feels good about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We kind of I when I listen to kids at startups saying, "Oh, well, we're we're operating at under our burn rate. I said, your burn rate. I love the phrase burn rate, right? It's like, okay, so you're burning money and you're just not burning it as fast as you thought you would. When are you
Right,
going to
right.
start making it?
Making
You
money.
know?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's just kind of a weird mentality. I don't know what we're teaching out there, but I think burning money is not a good example.
Yeah, no, they're thinking a little too big, perhaps. So, you know, I'm currently in an area of my town that's known as Faraya or Farrier in English. I'm where the blacksmiths were. I'm in a 15th century building. This is built around 1450 or so,
Yeah, I like the
and so
rocks, the wood, the stonework there.
yeah, 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 and so you know, this is where all the blacksmiths were, all the smithies were. And, you know, when we look at production today and the way that we machine, I mean, you're talking about people retiring who did work that your grandfathers, that, I mean, that work almost didn't exist, right? And so there was a period where, you know, Henry Ford set up production up in northern Michigan to make these car production lines because there was a huge wagon industry there already. The people who worked with spring steel and wood and all of those things that made the first
Wheels.
cars
Yeah.
and wheels, those already existed in that area. And there was this great concern that all the farriers would be out of business and the leather workers would be out of business. And of course, their work did go away, but they became the people who worked in the factories and made car upholstery seats as opposed to wagon upholstery seats and such. And, you know, the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter sort of talks about this concept of creative destruction. You know, that as we create new things, it destroys,
Yeah.
you know, but overall, I think that on the long arc, humanity is definitely in direction good. And although we have outsourced a lot of things in the West, we've effectively solved hunger. I mean, my mother and my father grew up almost starving. Like my mother, both of them ate whatever was passing through the area. My mother was 17 years old before she had running water and electricity in her home, you know, and hadn't been to a grocery store until I think she went with 12 years old, went with a friend. You know, my dad lived in a fishing port in Newfoundland, you know, and they ate whatever came through. You shot a moose, the birds came through. Those are the birds you're eating this week. You know, the fish came through, the calamari, the squid comes through. You're eating squid this week, you know, and they really were. You know, there's times where there's a story of my grandmother locking the door and pulling a knife on the government official who said there's no welfare check for her this month. You know, she had 14 kids. Like, we're talking about one generation. We're talking about my parents.
Yeah.
Lived on the verge of starvation. And I think, I don't remember the statistics, but in America, when you started your company, you know, we're like when we're talking about the D'Addario company now in the 1970s,
70s,
you know, there was still a very large percentage of the country which, you know, food was not guaranteed. And we've
and it's
effectively
unfortunately
solved this.
it's still pretty there though. I one of the charities my wife was on the board for years is Long Island Cares, which is Harry Chapin's food bank that he created for Long Island hunger, you know, to solve hunger on Long Island. It's still a big problem here. Is that we haven't solved it, but
Uh,
it's bad. It's better than it's ever been.
when Wilson Pickett sang, you know, girl, you remember when we had no shoes at the beginning of Don't Let the Green Grass Fool You, he wasn't talking figuratively. He, he means they had no shoes. And listen, is life perfect? It is not. But have we improved? We have absolutely improved. Yeah. And if someone thinks that we're in a worse situation today than we were in the 1960s or 50s, they just don't know anything about their own history, because we're absolutely in a better place fundamentally. And so, you know, without getting too deep into the political side of this, keep it to the business and creative destruction side of things. You know, it's interesting to me because when people talk about bringing production back to the USA, I've used your company as an example because, you know, one of the people I know that's been involved with there, one of my first connections to the dairy is Chris Griffith. You know, I've known Chris for a lot of years, and Chris told me a long time ago about bringing anything that wasn't human intensive. You guys tried to bring back, I hope this is not inside information,
No.
but you tried to bring that back to Long Island already long before these tariff discussions.
Oh yeah.
And
Well,
you were
I had
leaders in this thinking.
I was a leader in tariff discussions in Washington in early 2000s. I worked with Senator Israel and Congressman Israel and Senator Schumer and so on. And I did a lot of lobbying, and I testified in front of the FTC and the it's just the Commerce Department and so on, because the tariffs were unfair. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we were getting
Mm-hmm.
tariffed like crazy when we try to sell strings. I mean, like our strings are tariffed 50% in Brazil because they have a couple of string companies,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How can somebody buy my strings there with that kind of fee on top of it, right?
Yeah.
So I felt that, you know, reciprocal tariffs needed to be discussed, but nobody wanted to listen to it. On a bipartisan level, they all agreed, but nobody ever wanted to do anything about it because there were so
Mm-hmm.
many other things tied to the reason we give somebody preferential treatment on tariffs. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe they
Mm-hmm.
let us have a military base there, or they let us do
Mm-hmm.
this. There's so many other things that are in the decision making that we don't know about. But
Yeah.
I was very early on with that thinking, trying to make some changes, but nothing ever got done.
Mm-hmm.
And they never really implemented a lot of programs to help manufacturing stay here. It never was
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started the business, there was a 10% investment tax credit. If you bought a $100,000 machine, you got a $10,000 deduction off your taxes. They eliminated
Mm-hmm.
that in the 70s. I don't think we've had anything like it since. Obama did something smart when he took over the catastrophe of an economy that was handed to him. He had this accelerated depreciation on your investment. So for I think it was 2 years, we were able to, fast depreciate
Mm-hmm.
capital investments we made. And instead of spending 4 or 5 million, we spent 7, 8 million a year, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a
Mm-hmm.
big help for us. Now, so if you really want to see manufacturing come back, the government needs to come up with these programs that figure out how to incentivize people to be interested, put their money there instead
Mm-hmm.
of somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
because there's money out there to invest, it's just they're not investing it in things that aren't going to bring them a good return. And manufacturing isn't going to bring you a great return if you do it the way you're doing it now. You've got to do
Mm-hmm.
something to help that along. And so I've been an advocate of that, and balance tariffs. I mean, just eliminate all the tariffs and say, okay, we're going to just charge you what you charge us. How would that do? I think I could beat up a lot of people if I was been playing in that boxing ring, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But but we're not. And I
That's a
mean,
great idea.
even something as simple as shipping strings to EU,
Mm-hmm.
2.7% tariff on my strings. But
Mm-hmm.
when our competitors in Germany or France ship strings into America, zero. Now that's changed now because they put big
Mm-hmm.
tariffs and 10% or whatever. I don't even know what it is this moment because it changes every day. But
Mm-hmm.
the thinking is not wrong. The execution was a little dramatic. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I've been a supporter of that for years. I mean, I never heard anybody talk about reciprocal tariffs before I was talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't really do reciprocal tariffs right now. We did some kind of like like I don't know, shooting for the moon stuff. I don't know what the hell the logic behind some of it is. Could have been done in a
Mm-hmm.
way where you actually were able to sell it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah.
but
Well, I have actually seen things coming back to America. I know of
mm,
people who are
yeah,
currently setting up production there that was somewhere else
yep,
because it has forced, or whether we want to admit it or not,
yeah, no, I'll
I've
be the first to admit
definitely.
it.
It is forcing some production back to America. Will we get everything due to what you're talking about? The skills don't exist. The people, like it certainly can't happen overnight because the people aren't here to do that kind of stuff. And yeah, and the materials, the supply chain to get the materials to work those things, there's been no demand here. So why would they buy? There's no suppliers, right? So,
Yeah,
and that's a long arc. And
no, I
so
know.
I agree with you, but I am confident in our ability to find solutions. And even though I've definitely been involved in far too many conversations about tariffs and the frustrations around them in recent months than I'd like to be,
Yeah,
that's what makes
and
this
and
work, I guess.
it was the crazy part is um, we've actually paid $1.5 million more tariffs in the first 6 months of this year than we would have without this situation, which forced us then to raise prices to get some of that money back, and we're
Hmm.
not getting all of it back. So we're sucking up some profit losses, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, it's made us think more about making things here, you
Hmm.
know. And although I've been doing it anyway, it's
Hmm.
always
Hmm.
top of mind. It's one of our first goals, and on our strategic list is to make more of our product here and to vertically integrate more. But
Hmm.
it's no question that it's heightened the the thinking towards that way, but nobody's given us the toolbox to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And I think if it came with a toolbox that made sense and was supported by the government, man, we could fly. I mean, we could do
Yeah.
lots of stuff here, but we're not getting that kind of help. We're just getting tariffed. you know,
Mm-hmm,
we're
mm-hmm,
getting
mm-hmm.
punished because we're buying some things we had to buy
Yeah.
because we couldn't
Yeah.
make them here.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but we'll see what happens. I'm
Right.
optimistic. I know we're going to figure out how to make it work for us. And
Yeah.
along the way, we'll make more stuff here, and that'll be great. And the more we make here, the more we control our destiny. And it could very well be, Jamie, that we can't be in the low end of a market, let's say. Maybe
Yeah.
we can't have the lower priced cable that we have from China. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's not an interesting business for us anyway. Maybe we want to sell a better cable for 20 or 30% more and made in USA, and somebody's comfortable with it and they'll buy that, and we just accept a little less business in that category. That's okay. You know, it's
Well, I
fine
think
with me.
that's the space that I live in most of the time. You can
Yeah.
compete on quality, on function, on price, and if you can match those things, then you can talk about looks. But you know, competing on price is the most boring of all those for me. I'd much rather compete on function and quality
Yeah.
because that's
Yeah.
exciting.
Definitely.
That's inspiring,
Yeah.
right?
Sure. Well, that's what makes me get up every day.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jim. Listen, for all of our listeners here, Jim and I are going to continue over just for another 2 or 3 minutes on the business of guitar, which we put behind a paywall so that we can feel comfortable talking about some inside industry stuff, which you can go over to patreon.com/business of guitar. Again, that's patreon.com/business of guitar. I think Jim and I are going to talk about, how you collaboratively work with instrument makers over there. I know it's a lot of our listeners, are instrument makers and musicians. And so we'll talk about what an ideal partnership looks like over there on the business side. So again, Jim, thanks for being on the regular part of the show. We'll say goodbye for here, and then we'll continue over on Business of Guitar. So
Thanks for having me.
thank,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Bye for now. You've been listening to Life with Strings Attached. If today's conversation meant something to you, consider passing it on. These stories find their place through the people who share them. A new episode comes out every Friday, right here, wherever you're listening. I'm Jamie Gale, and thanks for listening to Life with Strings Attached.